Hey, how's it going, New Life family? It is so good to be with y'all, and I'm stoked to be getting into God's Word with you guys as we continue through our Summer of the Psalms. And I'm going to share with you guys a psalm that really jumped out to me during our reading this week. It is Psalm 32. And the psalmist says, "How blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. How blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit." See, we live in a time where so many people are pursuing happiness, and in the pursuit of that happiness, they're finding more and more how unhappy they really are. And the thing is, we live in a broken world, and so often we try to find happiness in broken things. But the psalmist points our attention to the fact that there's an emptiness in our heart that no money, security, or pleasure can fill. We are empty, we are broken, but the psalmist says, how blessed. That word blessed means happy. It is a happiness that's not based on circumstances, but on something deep and concrete. And he says, I find my happiness in being forgiven of my sin. See, a lot of our issues, if we really boil them down, are not issues of that person or that thing, but they're issues of, do I trust God? Do I believe God? My issue is not with the thing, my issue is with my Creator and making the creation try to be what only the Creator can be for me. And the psalmist says, I am happy, I am blessed because my sin has been forgiven, because my main issue, the issue of the heart, has been dealt with by God. And so I do not have to be deceitful. I don't have to put on a show like I have it all together. And that's what sin tries to do. He says, the sin makes us deceitful. He says, when I was silent about my sin, when I tried to put on this show that I was okay, my body wasted away. My vitality was drained. I felt like I was just a shell of a person. And so often we do try to put on this mask that we've got it all together. But the psalmist says, what gave me joy was acknowledging my sin to God. See, sometimes we doubt that God is actually for us, but he shows us that despite what our flesh may say, despite what the enemy may say, see, those who are acting against us, the enemy of our soul and our flesh, which is hostile to God, they both tell us, God doesn't want to forgive you. God is done with you. You are a Christian. You shouldn't be this messed up. You shouldn't be this broken. You shouldn't keep sinning. And these enemies present the truth that we shouldn't be doing these things. But because we are broken, the reality is that we will always be falling short. There's only one perfect person. But we who try to be like him, we who try to be in relationship with him, will always come up short. That's only half the truth, though. The ultimate truth is God's character. The Christian perspective does not put the hope on our performance, but on the character of our God. He reveals his heart in Exodus 34 as being compassionate and gracious, patient with us, overflowing with steadfast love and faithfulness. And he says, I forgive sin, iniquity, and transgression for thousands. And so for us, we can trust that our God's heart is for us, and we see that ultimately in the cross. The fact that God came and dealt with our sin personally by letting it fall upon him, not making us pay the consequences of our sin, but taking it upon himself and giving us his righteousness and his forgiveness, that is a sense of, that should spark in us a sense of joy and excitement. Our biggest problem, our sin, and our trying to pretend that we aren't sinful, that has been dealt with. And sometimes we don't give up our sin. The psalmist says in verse 9, don't be like a horse who has to be given a bit or a bridle to be driven around. Joyfully come to God. Openly come to him and say, God, I am broken, I am messed up, because he knows it already. And the only reasons we really hold on to our sin is because we either believe that the sin can actually make me happy, we doubt God saying this is bad for you, and we think, well, maybe if I hold on to this a little bit longer, I'll find the happiness that I want. Or we don't want people to see our brokenness. We don't want them to see how messed up and unhappy we are, so we just keep it hidden. But that will only make us waste away. The joy comes in exposing ourselves to God and being reminded, I am broken. All of us come to the cross on equal footing. All of us come as needy people in need of God's forgiveness. So this morning, I ask you, offer your sin to God. Be like the psalmist and acknowledge your brokenness and your sinfulness. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a Christian that lived in the 1940s, he says in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, it is only because we follow Jesus that we can be genuinely truthful. For then he reveals to us our sin upon the cross. The cross is God's truth about us, and therefore it is the only power which can make us truthful. When we know the cross, we are no longer afraid of the truth. Sometimes we like to hide. We like to put up a mask that we are all together. Maybe you, right now, as you're watching this, you are stuck in a secret sin that you're afraid to tell people about because you don't want to be seen as broken. Or maybe you're not even struggling with a particular sin. You just present yourself as having it all together. I encourage you, be truthful. Acknowledge your sin first and foremost to God. And then be real with your brothers and sisters. And tell them. Boast about God's grace. Boast about his willingness to forgive, because chances are your brother or sister is feeling the same shame that you feel, and they need to be reminded that our God is ready to forgive, and we will all be seeing darkness vanquished as we shine the light upon it, and that's something we can rejoice about. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to get into the Psalms with you guys next time.